All right, everybody, welcome to Wednesday's episode of Spilling the Anxiety. I am your host, Angel Bosquez, and today we are going to talk about, it's kind of a continuance from my last podcast episode on Monday. If you didn't listen, please listen in. So we discussed stereotypes, and I wanted to single out this episode to touch on a specific stereotype that I deal with pretty often, and that is being a veteran. I want to recount some of my time in the military. I mean, that's a long story to tell, but I want to recount some of my time, some of the things that I went through, kind of give a real experience of what I experienced, and then also talk about my time after, so that way everybody has kind of like a clearer image of that everybody's veteran experience is not the same. And I just want to also say that my experience as a veteran is very different from others for several reasons, which you guys will find out during this episode. Please stay tuned, hang in there, and we will be back right after the break. All right, and we are back from the break. Okay, so to be completely honest, me enlisting was a bit of a fluke. I started my enlistment process in 2014. I'm going to try to streamline this as much as possible because there was a lot to fit in a very short amount of time. So I enlisted in 2014, or I started the process for enlistment in 2014. My friend Carrie had come out to see me at Monroe College. And there was a group, there was like a pair of soldiers that were recruiting outside of Monroe at the time. She thought one of them was cute, and we went to go talk with them because I was kind of playing wing woman. We went up, talked to them, exchanged information. Absolutely none of us had any intention of enlisting into the military. We were just talking just to talk. So after we exchanged information, honestly, forgot all about it. We didn't even actually exchange personal information. We gave them our numbers, like on their list to be considered for enlistment, like to get more information later. And we didn't collect any information about them. So whatever, that was done. Maybe about a month and a half later. No, I am lying. When we did this was when I first started at Monroe. So this is back in 2013. Excuse me, I'm so sorry. This was back in 2013. Whatever happened, they called. We said we weren't interested in enlisting. That was supposed to be the end of that. Fast forward a year later. Somehow my name got retained on the list. And whoever was the recruiter there now was calling me and asking me if I still had intentions of enlisting. I didn't. And they wanted me to come in, but at that point I had already met like my kid's dad. When I met him, he had just gotten out of the service. Things between him and I didn't work. We were kind of in this on again, off again stage. So I kind of wanted to join because of hearing his experience with it. And he always talks about like all the traveling he did and all that other stuff. And I kind of just wanted to get away, and I thought that would be the perfect thing. So when they called a year later, I wasn't actively thinking about enlisting. But when they called, I was like, you know what? Maybe that might not be such a bad idea. Now that I know somebody who's actually been through it. Okay. At the time, I was recovering from surgery where they found like this huge lump on my breast, and it turns out it was like this abscess, and they opened it up, they drained it, the whole nine, and under that they found another mass. So I needed to have that removed, but that like happens later in the story. Anyway, so I'm still recovering from that, and the recruiter comes to see me at my house. And he tells me, he was like, you know what, you can take the ASVAB, blah, 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 whatever. I didn't realize how serious I was about contemplating this, but I'm one of those people that once I say I'm going to do something, almost always, provided something doesn't like go down drastically, I do it. So as I was contemplating this, I was like, okay, it seems like I've already decided that this is something that I'm going to do. They let me know that I could back out at any time, but they were also, kind of pushy. So I entered this thing called the Future Soldier Program. So after I took the ASVAB, which I fucking aced, my GT score was amazing. So I qualified for absolutely anything. And that was the perfect time because all jobs were open and available. I ended up picking, I wanted something in the medical field because that's what I was in college for already. And I ended up picking their equivalent for LVN, which was a 68 Charlie. Now, I was supposed to ship off in, when was it? I think it was in January. Was it January? It might have even been December. I was supposed to go soon, but I had listed that I had an allergy to morphine, which I was told several years ago. Turns out it wasn't true. I went to an allergist and everything. They cleared me out for it. They ask you a bunch of questions like if you broke a bone, blah, blah, whatever. And whatever medically you've had wrong with you, you need a waiver for. I also needed a waiver because I have tattoos on my wrists, which if you're watching this video episode, you will see. How do I turn my wrist in? Okay. So where that crease in your wrist happens when you turn your hands in, like not even a quarter inch, bro, like 0.3 inches. If that is just like a slight little stroke above the line on each of my tattoos. I needed a commander to sign off on that it would be okay for me to go into the service with that little tiny bit. We'll go ahead and show the camera. That tiny bit right there and this tiny bit right here was fine to join the service with. These things pushed back my ship date quite a bit until March of 2015. I ended up passing. And then when I finally got like, okay, you have your ship date, everything is good, I joined the Future Soldier program, which was basically I needed to lose weight to make what they expected me to be for my height, which for my height, I was supposed to be 163 pounds. Let me tell you something. Nothing in this earth was getting me to 163 pounds. Absolutely nothing. And let me tell you something. I spent a month. I found a private trainer. I found a specific regimen. I didn't eat anything but natural fruit smoothies made with water. I think it was like water, green apple, banana. That's it. Maybe some muscle milk. And 3 times a day, I would make myself fresh fish and chicken breast. No seasoning, just lemon and like a pinch of pepper. Nutritionally, it was not even nutritionally, because nutritionally it was probably the healthiest I've ever eaten. But otherwise, that shit was the most flavorless month of my life. But I was very dedicated to losing weight. I was going to Zumba classes, Bosu ball classes, aerobics classes, some shit with some straps and all this other shit that kind of looks like trapeze art classes. And I went to all of that, and I was sometimes doing 2-a-days in the gym. 2-a-days, for those that you don't know, is when you go to the gym twice a day. So I was very devoted into doing this. I don't even like running, and I was running like a motherfucker. When I went in, I was only doing 2 push-ups. I made the cut, so they didn't test me again. But that's when I entered that month of training. And then after that, I finally get to the day where we go to MEPS, which is like the center where you go to ship off. And the way that I said goodbye to some of the people in my life, it varied a lot. With my kid's dad, I'll never forget it. We spent all day in his house. I actually lied to my mom to get out of the house in the middle of the night. Not for anything weird, but he was at the time, I believe he was a bouncer, or he worked something that required him to work overnight. And he got out. I went to his house, knocked on the door because he said he was going to pay for my cab. Knocked on the door, called him. He had his phone connected to the speaker. I could hear the speaker stop, my phone call ringing. So he was inside the apartment and he did not answer. I called repeatedly. I knocked on the door, all this stuff, nothing. After being there for like an hour, I took my ass back home. Why is it that the second that I get back home, he calls me talking about, oh my God, I'm so sorry I fell asleep. Can you come back? It's like, are you serious? Are you serious? I just managed to get back into my mom's house. So I made up some other lie and I left. At this point, it didn't really matter to me. I was going to be gone in 2 weeks. So I go back we had we watched Talladega Nights as the sun was rising, and I kind of fell asleep a little bit, and something was going to happen between us. But in all honesty, I was like, if something happens between us, I'm not leaving. I'm going to be under the assumption that you're going to commit, that we're going to do this for real this time. And what's going to happen is we're going to be really in each other's face for like a week. And then you're going to fall off the face of the earth again. And so will I. I've got to go. We can't do anything. And I told him that I was seeing somebody else. And that kind of put a damper on the fire. And what we did was we drank coffee. We went to go get Chinese food around the way from his house. And we came back and we watched, I want to say both 2 or 3 Jeepers Creepers movies. And we watched it all day and we sat down and we talked, and it was, man, the love that I felt for him at that moment, it was bittersweet because I knew that I was leaving and that was probably going to be the last time that I saw him, or that's how I felt. And I didn't want to say goodbye, but I did. And I left and I got his address so I could write him letters. I did have a good time. We celebrated my father's 60th birthday before I left, and I spent time with friends before I left. And that, now looking back on it, my mom said some pretty harsh things to me before I left. And the last date that I spent was very lonely. I spent it in my room playing Batman. And my father, like, he came to say goodbye to me because I was leaving the next day. And it was just very, my mother said some pretty harsh things to me. But now that I think back on it, although it doesn't excuse it and it still makes me feel pretty upset, I feel like she was just saying all those things because I was her baby and I was leaving without any consideration for anybody else. And I want everybody to know that if you're ever thinking about enlisting, although I doubt that, younger people are hearing this, but it's okay. Not having any regard for anybody when you're leaving is okay. That doesn't mean you're doing it selfishly. That doesn't mean that you're doing it in a manner that you don't care about anybody in your life. It just means that you are deciding to do this with your life despite other people that may want you to stay. I want you to think about it as the equivalent of when people are like, oh my God, but when are you going to have another baby? Because your babies are so cute and all that other stuff. And it's like, okay, maybe with your vagina, Miss Robinson, but not mine. Because you asked me when I'm going to have another baby. So that way, every 6 months when you come around, you have another baby to look at. Why don't you go ahead and have that shit? Not me. Because this is my life. I need to live with my life after you're gone, after you're said and done. So I went. And it was an experience. Okay, I left in the beginning of March 2nd. I left and it was me and 3 other men. We were leaving together from the Bronx. It was... Oh no, Mark was going somewhere else. So it ended up being, it was me and it was supposed to be 3 other men. One of them flaked out at the last minute. I went to the recruiter station with Mark, my other buddy from the Future Soldier program, because we were working out together. We were both pretty heavy and we needed to get down to a decent weight in order to ship out. So we were shipping out on the same day, and he asked me, if I wanted to ride to the station with him. And I'm like, sure. So we go there, and it was me, Kim Washington, Sean Tillman, and Christopher Herrera. Never forget it. There was supposed to be another person with us leaving on the same flight, but he didn't make it. So the 3 of us were there. And this felt very, very, very weird to me because at this point, once I left my mother's house and I said goodbye, from that moment on, I was an adult. Now, I was an adult before then. I was working late nights. I was doing all that, but I still lived with my mom. When I left, that's it. I was an adult. I had no responsibility to anybody but myself. I didn't have to tell my mom where I was going, what I was doing. And then I was traveling with 3 men that I was supposed to stay with. There were no other females in sight there was 3 men that I had to stay with, and we all had to go to the same destination together. It was so weird, and it made me feel a little bit uncomfortable, really, because I was not used to being surrounded by strange men. But I believe Chris was about my age. Sean and Kim were older, so they kind of stuck together, but they were all relatively pretty cool. And they were gentlemen, actually. Nobody tried anything crazy. So we all kind of just traveled together, and then we ended up getting stuck in Houston because there was some sort of delay on the flight. Now, mind you, the day that I left, I didn't tell anybody this, but like 3 days before, the day before, I had actually gotten a biopsy on that lump on my breast. I had my breasts ace bandaged down, and when I got checked at MEPS, because they do make you strip down to your panties and your and your bra and make you squat like a duck and walk to see if you could do that and do a whole bunch of other exercises. This is very weird. I ended up passing. I was over by 1 pound, even though I was in the greatest shape of my life, but I made tape, which was, if you don't make weight, which is you don't pass that number on the scale, they tape your neck, your waist, and your hips to check your body fat content, and I made it in. So I took off the ace bandage for that, and I wore a full coverage bra so they couldn't see the incision. And then when I got back out, I ace bandaged myself back up. We were only encouraged to bring like 3 pairs of underwear, some socks, a couple of change of clothes, and that's it. And that was all going to get taken from us anyway, minus the underwear. And you could only wear, as a woman, I believe it was black, brown, or beige. Black, white, or beige underwear. So anyway, we go, and when I got to Houston, when I touched down, I listened to my voicemail, and my doctor was telling me that it was clear that it was not cancerous. So I was like, whew, thank you, Jesus. I literally left with thinking, oh my God, what if I have cancer? And I didn't tell anybody. So that was a relief. And then, so I finally touch down to Houston and find out that's what it was. When we got to Houston, there was no problem in Houston. Our connecting flight to Oklahoma had been canceled because there was this huge snowstorm, a blizzard there. And so we were stranded in Houston, and we had no idea what to do and who to contact. We're going to take a break here, and when we come back, I'm going to tell you what happened while we were stuck down in Houston. Stay tuned. Okay, everybody, and we are back. Wow. Talking about this is bringing back memories, because I don't know how many of you guys listening to this are parents, but when you think about your life before you were a parent, when you were basically a kid yourself, the nostalgia is real, and that doesn't necessarily mean good or bad. It's just, there's some powerful feelings involved. So we get stuck in Houston. We get in contact with somebody, find out, call the base that we were supposed to be at and find out, tell them, hey, we've been stuck. And they say that they're hearing this from other soldiers. So we were basically put up for the night. It was so late at night, and we were exhausted, and we all just kind of crashed. And then in the morning, we took the shuttle back to the airport to take our flight. They had given us a new flight, and we were on our way to Oklahoma. We make it to Oklahoma. Snowstorm is still raging, but it was enough so that way the flights could get in. So we get in there, and we meet up with a whole group of everybody who came from across the U.S. to go to this basic training, which by the time of enlistment was, our battery was 183 soldiers. So 183 souls from everywhere across the country now meeting up at this place. And our entire basic training got pushed back because of the snowstorm. So I guess they brought in new classes on a weekly basis, and because a week was how long the onboarding took. And this is kind of when you were in limbo, what they called the other side of the tracks, where it was like you could send out letters, but there wasn't an address for you to get them back from because you were going to be there so temporarily. And but it turned out that I was there for like 2-3 weeks. I don't remember. I know it was more than 2 weeks though. At that point, there were some people that they couldn't handle what was happening then. At this point is when you were really introduced to like waking up in the middle of the night and doing fire guard, which was pulling security on your bay at night. Your bay is where you sleep. Pulling security is basically you were making sure nobody came and, fucked up all your battle buddies. There were people that we saw that just didn't make it because they felt like the lifestyle from then is when you can't talk if they're not talking to you. You have to get your shots. There were people that their hair didn't make the cut. Now, mind you, before I went into the service, I had crimson red hair. And I use crimson as the term, as the shade of red, because that's exactly what was on the bottle that I was using to keep my hair red. Crimson. The only way that I could get that off without severely fucking up my hair was dyeing my hair black, which I did. Black was not my natural hair color, although I do have to say it did look pretty ravishing on me. But even now, if I stand under the sun, at the very end of my hair, because I've gotten very few haircuts, at the very end of my hair, you can see in the sun my hair will turn red and all sorts of different shades because I still have some of it left in my hair. And this was years ago. So I dyed my hair black. There were some people who were forced to dye their hair, and also the men got their hair shaved and we got, our uniform then. But there were women who were forced to dye their hair with their own money because it was an unnatural hair color. That was also quotation marks. They were, if you were too blonde, your hair was too red, you had any other color that didn't look like brunette or a natural blonde or a natural carrot top. Muted carrot top would probably be more appropriate. You had your hair dyed or cut. So basically, while everybody was getting all these things done, you also got, your glasses. You went out to go shop for sneakers that were appropriate, that were fitting for the uniform. You learned everything about what you needed to learn. You went to the DFAC, which was where you eat. It was all very, sometimes I can think about it now. If it's nighttime and I'm looking outside and I hear birds chirping, it takes me back to the fucking camp, man. And all I can think of is I would be sitting there 4:30 in the morning, marching on my way to go get breakfast, looking at the stars ahead of me, just hearing the silence, marching in cadence, just hearing boots against the gravel, hearing us call cadence so we can stay in step. And being in formation and my arms swinging and not wearing a coat, even though it was cold outside, but I had warm weather gear under, and the way my uniform fit, the way my boots feel, I'm telling you, sometimes when I get caught up in that feeling, it's almost like I'm transported back in time and I forget where I'm at. And sometimes that serenity that comes with marching at night while the sun is rising to go get breakfast, and to have not any other responsibility in the world except that march in time to go get breakfast, that's a feeling sometimes I really want back, because my life is so chaotic right now that I crave that life of no variables. This is what you're going to do every day, and this is how it's going to feel. And mind you, I wasn't a parent in the service. For parents in the service, it may very well be a different feeling. It may be a very different kind of exhausted. But I was a single woman. I was not married. I had no kids. And it was so freeing. Whew, just talking about it is giving me goosebumps. But after that, when we finally got past that onboarding process and we made it to the other side of the tracks, our drill sergeants came and they picked us out, and we stood in, our platoons were split up from, every soldier from A to Z was split up in groups of 4. So like everybody from A to F went in first platoon, from G to K or whatever, kind of like that. So different letter groups until everybody was divided. And I happened to be in first platoon, which was senior drill sergeant's platoon. Now, senior drill sergeant took a lot of pride in his platoon, in his bay, everything. Now, we were in these trailer houses that were out all the way at the end of the battery. We were actually away from the starship, which is what they call the main barracks where they held soldiers. We just so happened to be in trailer parks out by ourselves all the way in the back. So that was I didn't even note that there was a difference because we were not explained that we were going to be in the starship, or we didn't know that was a thing. So now that I'm looking back on it, I would love to do basic training again with the knowledge that I have now, which wouldn't work because I'm like 90% disabled. So they wouldn't even take me if I wanted to. But they could. I could scale back my disability and I could lie my ass off and go back into the service. But at the time, I was 19 and I wasn't even the youngest person in my platoon. There was this girl, Parrish. They called her Baby Boots. She was 17 going on 18. And she was the youngest person. I was nowhere near the youngest person in my platoon. And I think the oldest person was like a hair away from 35. If I go in now, I would be definitely one of the oldest people there, which is sad when you think about it, or when I think about it. Anyway, I went in and basic training was harrowing. I didn't handle it well. I don't think I did. At the time, I mentioned this in an earlier podcast, I was a person who craved a lot of attention. And let me tell you, that personality of wanting to crave attention, you have to want to be an individual. You cannot blend into a team. Not successfully. And I think that's why a lot of young people get out of the service, is because they're not done maturing yet. And so that sense of wanting to be an individual is not gone yet. You can't accept that. And I think that a lot of what happened to me during basic training was courtesy of me wanting to stand out and be an individual and make everything about me. There were a lot of experiences during basic training that I won't give away, but it was hard and it was meant to break your spirit. It was meant to get you to hate life and to feel like others hated you and to withstand that pressure. If you were an individual in any way, shape, or form, it was frowned upon. And the only way it wasn't frowned upon is if you were an individual of the sense that you were a leader of the team, which I was not. I was a very self-serving individual. Now, I was all for being a part of the team, but I also wanted attention for myself. Fast forward through basic training, I make it. I get stationed in San Antonio. And again, I was still under the mentality about me. This needs to be about me. I want people to know that I'm doing this above my mental health issues. Not a good quality at all. I made it. I made it through my first part of AIT, which is basically advanced training for your job. I was training to be a nurse. I did not fail one exam. I did get to this point where I ended up getting married with somebody from my basic training, which is quite literally, they advise you not to, and now I can see why. I had written a lot of letters to my kid's father, and he never responded. And that kind of got to me. And so in true fashion, in my quest to get attention and to live this perfect lifestyle that I was trying to set up for myself, slamming career, get married, have kids, there was somebody who was very nice to me during basic training, and we became friends, or as much friends as we could get during basic training. And after, he asked me to marry him. And I was so enthralled with the idea of somebody asking me to marry them that I didn't factor in whether I love this person or not. But in my mind, if I marry this person, then that means that I love them, and I'm going to do everything possible to exhibit that. So I was going to do my job regardless. But my marriage, or lack thereof, from I do to I don't, will be another episode. This, after I got out, I think that it was scarring for me to see that these tricks that I was used to playing to get attention, and this attention that I was vying for, that shit wasn't working with anybody there, and that nothing, and that what it was is that I was coming off as a very needy individual and somebody who could not function in this structure because I was trying to get out of the box and not in a leadership form. It was problematic. It was not something that bode well for me, but I did complete my nurse training. I completed everything. And I think what got to me the most was that towards the end, when I was going through my divorce, so troponin is a hormone that is released into your blood when usually after there's been some sort of heart damage, predominantly after a heart attack. Anything above like 0.03 is significant enough to look at. My troponin levels at one point, after me feeling like I was having a heart attack, was 0.03. And I kept insisting to everyone, I'm like, you don't understand, something is wrong. And I was feeling very crazy. My weight was fluctuating. I was obsessed with my weight gain or lack thereof. The fact that I had gotten into a marriage that I really didn't want to get into, that now I was going to get divorced and everybody was going to know that I was getting divorced, it was hitting me. I wasn't enjoying my lifestyle because I immediately got married and I saddled myself to the barracks. All of these things were coming and they were hitting me fast. And I went through things there that I still live with today, things that I don't want to talk about. But it was a disaster. And then when I decided to get divorced because my on the low husband tried to put his hands on me, and I told him, I'm like, this kind of marriage just doesn't cut it for me anymore. You want to tag me like a deer and I'm not even doing anything wrong. This kind of lifestyle, what it was, the stuff that he was accusing me of, and then what I found out later that he was spreading behind my back. I feel like he was the same kind of individual I was. He was seeking attention and he was damaged, but that it wasn't two people seeking attention can't be together. They just can't. I don't believe that it'll be successful in any way, shape, or form. So after that was said and done, I called my kid's dad for his help because I realized that, soon I felt like I was going to be leaving the service, which I didn't want to, but I felt like it was going to be happening, and I wanted his advice on how to stay. I didn't feel like I had any leadership in my corner whatsoever. So I asked him for help, and that's kind of what opened the door for me and him to start talking again. You guys know the story. I ended up getting out of the service after I found out I was pregnant. They gave me an opportunity to stay, and I was like, no, I want to go home, and I want to have my baby and all that other stuff. And I came home, and when I came home, I didn't think that I spent enough time in the service for it to affect how, basically me coming home. But that's what it felt like. I felt like I had been gone for too long of a time. Everybody's lives kept going. I didn't know where the hell I fit anymore. I was coming home, and we didn't have an apartment. We went to go stay with his sister, and I was pregnant, and my mom didn't approve of the way that I'd gotten my divorce and what was happening, and the fact that I got pregnant, after I got separated, and it was a lot. There was no more marching at 4:30 in the morning to go get breakfast. There was no more working throughout the day. There was no more working in a hospital. There was no more, I know what I'm going to wear every day. All of these things that I appreciated about the lifestyle were gone. And just trying to maneuver the army isn't so stringent that you don't have, like after you get off of your job, you're off. You go to Walmart, you go wherever it is. If you want to go to the club, if you want to go do anything, you want to hang out with your friends in the barracks, all of that doesn't matter. You can go do what it is that you want to do. But having that freedom all of the time when I got home and knowing nobody and not having anybody that was going through the same thing as me anymore, everybody's lives were different because nobody does the same thing anymore. I was surrounded by people who had my same job. And even those people that didn't have my same job, I was surrounded by people who knew what the routine was every day. The friends that I had made in the service, they had moved on to their duty stations, and I went home pregnant and now divorced, and it didn't look like I was getting married either. It took me a long time to adjust my sleep schedule. It took me a long time to, when I was in the service, all I did was text my best friend. And now that I was home, I was texting her all of the time because I was panicking, because now that I was home, this was the first time that I had lived with a man. Because when I was married, I didn't live with my husband. We were stationed separately. I at no point was actually a wife to this man, except when we visited each other once a month. And from I do to I don't, it was 10 months. So I came home and everything was different. I didn't know how to maneuver that at all. And it was hard for me. And I think that's where my depression really set in. So we're going to take a quick break, and then when we come back, I'm going to wrap up the segment by talking about what happened after I came home and try to make it about not my pregnancy. So stay tuned. We'll be back. Okay. And we are back for our final segment of this episode. So I came home and I was struggling to get rid of this lifestyle that had been drilled into me. Mind you, I didn't see any combat. I saw some pretty gnarly things in the hospital, but I didn't see any combat. I was not overseas. I led a pretty normal routine aside from what was going on. So when I came home, it still was a blast of cold water to the face, because it was something I desperately wanted to work. Even so much as steady healthcare, whenever I wanted to, I just went to the hospital, and I didn't really have to do much but give my name. That was all different now. And then I was pregnant, and I was trying to figure out where I would get my information from, and me and him were living together for the first time. I had never lived with a man, and he was almost 10 years older than me. I was very naive. I felt like he wasn't being an appropriate partner. I was upset because we weren't getting married. I think it was a lot to handle, and then I found myself wanting to be back in the service, and I let myself fall into this depression because I missed my own life back, and I didn't know if getting pregnant with this baby and moving back to New York was a mistake. I want to pause right here and say that absolutely no part of my experience did I talk about, the people that I'd seen kill themselves, or the action that I saw, or, that I came home without all of my limbs. And I did get diagnosed with PTSD later on, because I think maybe I just clung to the service so much. I was not handling transition well, and the beliefs that I had while I was in the service, them trying to break that out of me and build me into what it was that they wanted me to be, and that I didn't fall in line with that caused a shift in my mental status. Like, I wasn't lining up. Like, it was a misalignment of my thoughts, what I wanted, what I expected, what they needed from me, how I acted. and I kind of felt like everybody was against me, which is not, when you fall outside of that box in the service, it's not hard to feel. But all of these problems that I came home with, I didn't want to kill my baby every time I heard fireworks. And I mean, yeah, I'm a little jumpy. I can't sit with my back to the door of a restaurant, but that's because I've been trained to be self-aware of my surroundings, keep my head on a swivel, not murder my family because all I see is dead people. Now, my experience, like I said, it was different. I spent but 2 years in the service. People spend a lot more. But I will tell you that my partner, my kid's dad, he was also, he is a veteran. He was also a soldier. And, you know, he has a lot of issues, but there was never a fear that he was going to get out of control and kill me because he wasn't himself. Never. And he spent 9 years on the front lines as infantry, overseas, in combat. So I wanted to do this episode to give a little bit more about myself, give a little bit of insight into what was going on in the service. And what inspired me was that, you know, on Twitter, I asked, you know, where are my veterans at? And there was this one person who he put out, I read his article. It was an interview that he did. And, you know, it was like everybody had assumed that he's like this, you know, sociology professor, and everybody just assumed that he was like this crazy nut who was missing a leg because he always wore leg apparel and like long stuff and never showed off his legs. And it's just the stigma that people put out there with you being a veteran. Like, oh my God, where did you serve? As if we all just go to Iraq. And then if you don't go to Iraq, it's like, did you even really serve? Army is needed everywhere. Marines are needed everywhere. Military is needed everywhere. I think that I'm proud of what I did. I'm proud of the time that I served. A huge part of me wants to go back. And another part of me is like, I'm good. I don't know how I would handle it today if I went back. Things in the Army have changed drastically in the few short years that I've been out. But I guess I would like to go back. But maybe it's also because there, in that lifestyle, there was a contained freedom that I don't think I'll ever find again. But that was my experience with the service and what happened when I came back out, why it was so hard for me to adjust. I know that I'll add more to the story at a later date, but my skin is starting to crawl with nostalgia. So we are going to wrap it up here. Thank you, everybody, for listening in. Once again, my loyal fan base that is comprised of like 6.5 people. We're growing. And I will talk to you on Friday. And on Friday, we are going to discuss another slightly heavy topic, pun intended, my journey with my weight. So tune in. I'll see you guys on Friday, and stay safe.